Radio Split Ranch.
Hello and welcome once again to Radio Split Ranch, a monthly visit with the Capital Region's great broadcasters of the past and sometimes present. I'm Warren Garling when I'm not on the radio. Are you ready to have some fun? I mean, that's the actual aim of our monthly podcast, to put a smile on your face, not unlike the whole reason behind the career of the entertainer who wrote our opening theme, Drew Jacobs. If you go to drewjacobs.com, you're going to find a whole bunch of fun, whether it be a listing of Drew's next concert appearance or the choice selection of parodies that Drew has compiled on various CDs. Check out his website while you're listening, drewjacobs.com. Sometimes in the radio business, you hear about a person you wish you'd worked for, or at least with. And that's what this month's guest has been for me over the years. He's been mentioned by quite a few of our previous visitors to the Radio Split Ranch, who had the chance to work with him during his many years as a successful program director. You actually may know him by a different name, a character voice he did for many years on a top-rated local morning show. All of those memories will be addressed as you listen to my conversation with Jon Knott. Well, this is a first. I actually had someone get in touch with me and say, gee, can I be on your podcast? And usually it's trying to, pull teeth to get guys to come in here. But Jon Knott is with us this month, and it was awfully nice of you. I have the feeling it may have been because your name came up a few times from some of the folks we've already interviewed.
I need equal time.
Yeah, I figured that what it was, that the fairness doctrine still applies on this particular podcast. So we're going to give you the equal time. But what I really like about all the interviews I've done so far is anybody that's brought your name up is always smiling, is always positive, and has never had anything bad to say about you, Jon. So we're going to change that, okay? I want to hear what was really going on behind the scenes. But in any event, thanks for coming up. And Jon currently lives in Florida, so another thing is interesting is that he came to town to do this in person.
Right.
Now, I hope you didn't do it just because of the podcast.
No, I didn't, but
Okay.
it worked out. So.
Okay, good. You have family still in the area.
We both have a lot of family, and I have my niece's wedding is this weekend.
Oh, perfect.
So.
We just went to my nephew's wedding this past weekend. Awesome. Over in Massachusetts. Yeah.
Nice.
So very good. Well, welcome. You're looking healthy. I know you had a little bit of a health scare earlier this year, and everybody should know that. He looks like he's from Florida. First of all, how long you been down there?
It'll be 4 yeyears in October.
Okay. All right.
Actually, 4 years in next month that we bought the house, and then we moved a little bit later. So
cool. Let's flashback, if you will, and go all the way to the beginning of things. Let me ask you first: are you an area native, or were you born and raised here in this area?
Yeah, I was born in Albany.
Okay.
And about 9 or 10 years old, I moved to Columbia County.
Okay.
So to Stuyvesant in Columbia County, and did all my growing up there, and ended up with my first radio job. Driving back and forth.
Seriously?
From Stuyvesant.
Yeah.
And then it was around the gas crisis.
Oh, that must have been
where
fun.
I was like doing 7 to midnight.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get home some nights because I couldn't get gas beforehand, and I couldn't get gas.
Oh, those were wild
later.
times.
And then I just decided, I'm going to move.
So you wound up
so I
coming
moved to
up.
Troy.
Yeah, that's cool. So what got you interested in the first place? How old were you when you decided, unfortunately, to try to make money in radio?
Yeah, I'm still trying now. Probably it was high school age because some friends and I would listen to the WTRY countdown on Friday afternoon, and we would write them all down. We would write the top 30 or 40. I think it was 30 back then. And then we would talk during the week, and we would predict what was going to happen.
Wow.
In the coming weeks. And so we did that for weeks and weeks. And then on Friday afternoon, I'd be like washing my dad's car or something and listening to the countdown and seeing how close I came.
How old do you think you were again?
I was probably 16, 17,
Okay,
something like that.
yeah.
Maybe a little bit younger.
Sure.
But that was...
And what year was that? You could tell perhaps by who you were listening to. Who were the jocks you were listening to on TRY at the time?
I want to say it was Bill Rock doing the countdown.
Okay.
TRY, but John Kramer was doing mornings, and I can't remember exactly, who was on during that particular time, but I remember those guys. Remember Mike Fitzgerald.
Okay.
Remember Mike Fitzgerald was doing a remote at Colony Center, and I happened to walk by, and I super shy person at that point, and walked up to him and asked him if they all used a special microphone because they all sounded alike. They all sounded just like this,
That's great.
Yeah.
So pretty early. Had you thought about doing anything else with your life prior to then, or were you? This was the first thing that you kind of got enamored with.
I guess I always liked an office atmosphere. So I went to Hudson Valley Community College for accounting, and never ended up finishing that, but I'd be going back and forth to classes, and Hudson Valley Radio was there, and the way they had it worked was the classes they'd start at the top of the hour, and they would dismiss at 10 of.
Okay.
So between 10 of and the top of the hour, they would throw the radio station onto the PA system so you could hear it throughout the campus.
Wow.
And so people would, be on the radio saying, if you're interested, come on down. So I started hanging out there.
Oh, there you go.
This was a real interesting way to actually get into starting into radio, is because, like I said, I was very, very shy. I would go to the radio station, not talk to anybody, just watch. And I would sit in the studio and just watch these guys, and I would see how they would cue up a record and see which pot they used. And I was learning by observation.
Okay.
And then one day, at the end of the period, and there was a guy on the air and said, I got to get to class, and there's nobody here.
Oh, geez.
So he just put a record on and left. And I'm like looking around, and there's nobody there. and then finally the record's getting to the end, so I got up and put another record on.
Okay.
And that's the rest is history.
Didn't even open the mic. Just put another record on, or did you?
I
say
did
something?
after a while.
Okay.
I think I did a weather forecast or something, and but the station manager, general manager, came in at some point and said, well, you're new. And so I just started doing a show.
What a way to back into it.
Really?
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That's a new one. I hadn't heard that story before.
Yeah.
We do have quite a few folks that did do college radio, and I really honed my craft there, even though I'd been on the radio prior to going off to college. But boy, I was able to learn so much by being on, every afternoon, for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So you had some fun there. Of course, you're not making any money. That's just a little, side hobby. And you say you didn't finish the accounting.
No, I didn't finish. I ended up taking accounting a couple of times at Siena College later in my career, but because it helped at work. But the station manager at WHVC in Hudson Valley was doing the all-night show at WHRL.
Ah.
And he was leaving to go to another job, and he suggested me. So I went over, applied for the job, got the job.
There you go.
And so I left college at that point.
Okay, went full-time into radio.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So, and that at the time still being owned by and run by Bob Hill.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I've told the story before that I got an offer from Bob and from Kent Jones in Saratoga Springs on the same day, and I took the one that was 15 cents more an hour.
Right.
That was the whole idea, is to make a little bit more money,
Yep. A little bit. Yeah.
A little bit is exactly it. Yeah. So HRL, and you were overnight?
Yeah,
All
I did.
right. How long did...
I did overnights. Ended up, I think I did afternoons for a little while too, later on, but I, that was a format that was literally male vocal, female vocal, group instrumental, and you just kind of got to pick and choose whatever you wanted to play. And I would play, in the 3:30 in the morning, I would be playing Too Late to Turn Back Now by Cornelius Brothers and Sister Rose that I brought in.
Just kind of slinking that there because it was easy listening, right? It was just MOR, that sort of thing.
Easy listening to Andy Williams to Andre Castellanos.
That's what I thought. Yeah. But every once in a while, you'd sneak in your own 45 or two.
Nobody was awake anyway.
Yeah, nobody's listening. Yeah, I found that out many times. Sometimes in the middle of the day, they weren't even listening. Okay, so HRL, quite an experience. Got your obviously got your feet wet and got interested in doing more than just what you were doing. Yeah. Well, where did this lead you? Now, about what year are we talking about here, John?
72.
Okay.
72 to 73. I think I was there about a year.
Okay.
And Rex Gregory was doing mornings.
Right.
Can't remember who was on afternoon. I remember Chris Martin was doing sales and weekend shows and stuff. And Bob Hill was very eccentric. And
Now, I don't know if I've asked this question too often of my guests, but was there someone along the way that kind of showed you or helped you or that you could lean on if you had questions about what to do, or did it all seem to be coming naturally to you?
I think later in my career, management-wise, yes, I had mentors.
Okay.
But early on, it was very much me listening to myself and comparing to others.
Okay.
I did an awful lot of it myself, and would do air checks.
Sure.
Whether it's overnight or afternoons or wherever I was, and then I'd go home and listen and
exactly
cringe. But I learned by hearing myself, not the way I wanted to hear it, and so I learned. I learned a lot on my own. By the time I got to Wish and TRY, people like John Pinchotore and Rick Mitchell and a few others really, helped me. Like John Pinchotore would always say, "Yeah, but it's not your normal voice yet. You got to relax a little bit more."
Interesting. Yeah. I had, when I was on my first radio station at the age of 16, 17 at WSNY in Schenectady, I had someone in the studio with me that I didn't know very well, but she was good looking, so she was allowed to stay there for a little while. And again, probably in the off hours, nobody had any idea anybody's in the studio. So, we'd be standing there talking, and then I'd turn around and go on the radio and do my thing, and then turn back around. She said to me, "Why you do that?" I said, "What? You have a completely different voice on the radio than you do standing here talking to me." Right. And I'm thinking, well, it's because I'm a DJ. This is how I have to sound. Again, I'm 17 years old. And it wasn't until college that you can hear the hit starting to happen. Yeah. I'm becoming my own voice and realizing I don't have to sound like an announcer, Yeah. And it did happen. But boy, my days at SNY, it really, I was trying to emulate what I heard others doing, and you didn't really have to do that. It became more normal later. So same thing, interesting that happened to you.
Yeah, there was when. Getting ahead a little bit, but I ended up going to Wish, and then we changed format from oldies to beautiful music, and that's not something at 22 or 3, whatever it was. Really? It's not something you want to hear or experience.
Exactly.
But at that point, I was the boss, so I had to let everybody, not force everybody to like it, but just I had to lead. And the Schulke format was so good technically.
Sure.
And there was a guy there named Dave McPhee who was kind of the consultant, the on-air guru who would help everybody, and he would listen all the time.
Sure.
And I went from WHSH FM 106 to he kept having to slow down, and I mean it really got to the point where we had to just slow down and go WHSH Now, a brief summary of the news.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
it's even actually sounds almost forced because we don't really talk that way in real life.
yeah.
But you brought it all the way back to the other direction. You
Right,
slow down
yeah.
immediately. Yeah.
And actually, it was the best thing that ever happened to my voice.
Oh, there you go.
Because, I mean, it was, it's not something I wanted to go through at the time, but looking back on it, it was really good for me.
Yeah. So how did it come about? How did you leave Mr. Hill's tutelage and wind up over at the TRY Wish?
Yeah, there was a guy named Bill Patrick.
I remember that name.
Who he'd worked at ROW, I believe, and he came in to be program director, and he and I didn't get along great, and it was one of those things where I had already talked to Bob Roberts at Wish, and we got into an arguing match, and I said, well, I quit. And he goes, you're fired. And I'm, well, whatever. But so I left there pretty abruptly. And Bob Roberts, Johnny Williams, had said, I don't have anything here except this weekend I've got an opening. There's a guy from RPI who couldn't get home to do the shift, and he'll be back. And so I went on and did that like Saturday night shift, and the guy from RPI never came back.
Oh,
so
there you go. That worked out.
I had a part-time job, and then I had a full-time job, and then we went from live oldies to Drake Chenault, automation.
Yeah.
And we named the automation Herbie after Herb Scott, who owned the station.
I've heard that story. Yeah.
And that wasn't what young DJs want to hear either. But it was like I say, but by that time I was the boss. Bob Cruz had taken over from Bob Roberts, and then Bob was there for about a year, I guess, and then he moved on to Florida, and I kind of, by default, became the program director.
Kind of next in line sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. And probably had no right doing it back in those days.
Had you, is that something you were aiming for, or you just kind of fell into your lap?
Just kind of fell into it.
Wow.
But I liked doing that. I liked being able to help others. I liked the responsibility. Gave you a little bit more control over your life, a little bit.
Yeah.
And
so you were a mature 24-year-old.
I guess.
Yeah, there you go. Sure. Yeah. Well, do you have a large family? Do you have other siblings?
I have two brothers and a sister.
Okay, and where do you fall in that hierarchy?
I'm the oldest.
Okay, there you go. I think that has something to do with it.
I've heard that.
Yeah. I babysat 5 younger brothers and sisters starting at about the age of 14 or 15. It just seemed to me very natural when I got my first chance to be a boss that I had no problem with it. I seemed to be able to relate okay.
My mother always said that even when I was very young, she could ask me where my brothers and sisters were, and I knew. And the other ones didn't really know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess it was a responsibility thing.
Yeah. No, that seems to work. Yeah, very good. So you're running HSH, and you're playing music that you could live without.
Yeah.
Just listening perhaps to your sister station TRY because they're playing the music you like, right?
Yeah.
And you've mentioned some names already. Any others that you were working with at the time? Who were you boss of?
Larry Mossy.
Sure.
Mike Kelly, who did middays for an awful long time. And boy, I'm blanking.
That's okay. That's age.
One of the real trips was later in the Wish career. We needed a midday person. I was doing mornings, and I think Larry was doing production at that point. And we had an opportunity to have Ed Riley.
Oh, wow.
Come in and do middays, and I'm like, I don't need to tell him anything, but he was so willing to learn. He was such a gentleman.
Yeah.
And he was so smooth.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One of my favorites on TRY growing up. Yeah, absolutely. and I always looked up to him and just thought, and he had a unique voice. I mean, just one that you could pick out of a crowd. You know, he didn't sound like all the other disc jockeys, as far as I was concerned. You know, I never had the chance to meet him. I got to work with his daughter for a while. She went into news. Radio news, but I never got to meet Ed, and I would love to have. He
was an amazing man, and he was like dad to Larry and I. I mean, you know,
Makes sense.
Would give us very good advice.
Yeah. Because by this time he's easily in his 60s, probably, right?
Yeah, probably, maybe even more.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
All during this Wish time, I was working with Rick Mitchell, who was doing the morning show on TRY.
Right.
And I would do voices for him.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you guys on 4th Street in Troy at the time?
He was.
Okay.
He was, but we were always at the bunker.
At the bunker? You were in Niskayuna? Okay.
Yeah. I worked on TRY a little bit here and there, but I almost all the time worked out at the bunker.
Okay.
But it was a crazy thing. The 7 to midnight person would... If they're doing 7 to midnight at Wish, their job was to drive to Troy, to 92 4th Street, pick up all the logs and the production, and drive it out there
for the following
next
day.
It was crazy what we did.
Wild, yeah. Now, how did it come about that you and Rick hooked up?
I don't remember exactly what particularly started it, but Fred Peabody was the real, I guess, real kickoff of it, because Rick always would get these joke sheets, and there were so many jokes that sounded stupid for him to say. It just didn't sound right for him to use them, but they were funny jokes.
Sure.
But he just needed a dumb, not dumb, but just a wacky character,
to
do it. And we had heard Vernon with a V. Remember him on WNBC?
Oh, no, I don't.
He did afternoons.
Okay.
And it was back when WNBC had that like long jingle package, and I want to say Soupy Sales was on at the same time.
That's possible. Yeah.
But Vernon had all these bits.
Okay.
And he did a traffic guy, and and so that got us thinking, and then we literally looked in the phone book, just off names, and we found Peabody and then Fred, and it sounded funny, so we started using it, and we started off with doing the weather on top of the 500-story Rick Mitchell building in downtown Troy. And the character was like a Gomer Pyle type sound. It was like, "Hi there, Mr. Mitchell. This here is Fred Peabody in the TRY helicopter."
Hi there, Mr. Mitchell. This here is Fred Stonewall Peabody in the TRY helicopter.
How are you going to continue your standard of living without getting paid by the radio station to do traffic reports?
Well, Mr. Mitchell, I found a new thing which I might be able to make out pretty good at, you know.
What's that?
Well, you ever heard of artificial arms and legs?
Yeah, artificial arms and legs. Sure, that's no problem.
Well, I'm getting into manufacturing artificial fingers.
Artificial fingers?
Yeah, artificial fingers.
Fred, I've never heard of that, Fred. Could that possibly be profitable?
Profitable? Mr. Mitchell, I'll be making money hand over fist.
And the voice kind of changed over time, but Rick would write all these bits, and using all the jokes that he came up with, and he would write them up, all handwritten.
Jeez.
And then we would meet like once a week, once every 2 weeks, and just record them all.
Record them all.
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
And neither one of us got paid for anything.
Of course, it's just extra.
But it was so much fun. Rick and I would like go to Ponderosa or something like that, have dinner, and then go there and spend a couple hours, and it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
And then his girlfriend at the time became my wife, Jeanette, and then we had 3 kids: Luther, Beauregard. And I don't know if you heard, but if Fred and Jeanette had a baby at one point, so we went all through the pregnancy. And once the baby was born, we said, we're going to name him after you, Rick. And he goes, we're going to name him Mr. Because I always called him Mr. Mitchell. So it was Luther Beauregard and Mr. And so, I mean, we would do that. And Rick had this great voice, but everybody always knew him.
Yeah.
So I could change my voice and more easily. And so I would do the boss. He would have conversations with the boss, and I would go, Mitchell.
Okay. Cool.
And Fred Peabody and all of the appearances that we did is, my 15 minutes of fame.
There you go.
That was incredible.
I think that's where I actually first met you, is that I must have had an evening off, or maybe I finally changed my shift at GNA, and I went and saw you and Rick doing your thing at some night spot in Latham. I don't know which one it was.
Down Under?
Yes, I think it was. Yep. And so I do remember sitting there and laughing at you guys and figuring, hey, this buddy thing, could work. And I tried a couple different voices on the air myself over the years. I kind of experimented with it when I was down in Mississippi for about a year, and then came back and brought a couple of characters with me on the evenings. But once I moved into a day shift, the characters were gone. It just wasn't working at the time. But interesting stuff. Yeah. So that's where you got your claim to fame, because that audience was not really listening to the music that you were playing, mornings on HSH.
Right. Yeah.
So there's got to be a switch coming here soon. What's going on? Where does this all end up?
Well, it was we were beautiful music, Schulke beautiful music, up until the late '70s, and then I guess Herb Scott didn't want to pay the money anymore, so we got a lesser known beautiful music company called Cala Music.
That was the death knell?
Yeah. And Cala Music didn't come anywhere close to the quality of Schulke. Schulke was just amazing. I really got to appreciate music and being able to listen critically. Although, I didn't go home and, put it on my turntable. But so then Cala Music lasted for about a year or so, and then I got word that Burkhard Abrams was going to be coming in to take over the 106 FM, and John Kelly really didn't have a spot for me, but he wasn't firing me. He just said, I don't have a plan, and so I knew that Bill Selwood had just bought WWOM.
Yes, the wonderful world of music.
Yep. And I mean, that had been through a lot of changes just before that. And I would listen to them and say, I know how I would change that. And so I ended up getting Jeff Januszewski, who's out of Schenectady. He worked he worked at Wish for a while, and he ended up going over there and got me an interview with Bill Selwood. And Bill and I went out to lunch, and I essentially said, I know what you're trying to do, but it's not hitting the mark, and I know here's what I would do, and here's how I would do it.
Cool.
And he wasn't ready to make me a program director at that point because he was too new into the thing, but he hired me. And,
nice.
And I think I took a $25 a week pay cut to go there.
Yeah.
So I went from making nothing to less than nothing. And then 6 or 8 months or so after that, I became program director, and Bill was one of those mentors because he was. I always told people when you looked up "work hard, play hard" in the dictionary, his picture was there.
There you go.
Because he was in there 7 o'clock in the morning, and he'd be out all kinds of time at night. But I would go to him with all these ideas. Even while I was on the air, I'd run into his office and say, "How about we do this?" And he would say, "How would you do that?" I said, "I'll be right back." And it forced me to think through what I was going to do, and
sure,
before I presented something.
Yeah.
And then at one point, I had this list, because I always kept a list of things to do, and I was like, I can't get through this list. And I said to him, I know I can do all these things, but I can't get them done. Because he was a tough taskmaster.
Yeah.
It wasn't a tough guy to work for. He expected a lot. And he said, I was wondering when you were going to come to me. And he made some suggestions. I took some time management courses and through him. And he was a big help. I really got a lot further than I thought I ever would.
Nice.
Just because of him. So.
Yeah, very good. Now, take us through the change. What kind of music was he playing when you got there, and what did you do to make it successful?
He had just come off of a disco format.
I remember that.
And so he was doing. He grew up in Philadelphia, and he worked at KYW TV.
Okay.
And he was very familiar with Magic in Philadelphia, WMGK. And they were one of the premier AC stations at that point. It was kind of like Beautiful Music in a way, a Beautiful Music presentation, anyway. But still more AC. So he was playing that type of music, but it wasn't very hit oriented, and it wasn't very formatted.
Okay.
And it was kind of left up to the jocks a lot. So, so then I got in there and bought a whole lot of records. Went to the Blue Note record shop, bought a whole bunch of records.
We've all done that.
And we beefed up our library, and then over the years, we got a computer scheduling program. Worked with a couple of consultants here and there, and they all helped us. But I learned with him. I mean, he was very, I would say, like Lady by Kenny Rogers came out, and I said, Bill, this is slam dunk. And he goes, it's too new. And, and I mean, and he didn't know music. He just had this, he had this idea in his head that we should be playing familiar music. Yeah. And that worked.
A lot of stations went that way.
Yeah.
They didn't want to break the record. They wanted to make sure that by the time they started playing it, it was semi-recognizable. Yeah. And that makes sense. I can understand that in certain formats for sure. Yeah. And also depends on your competition and what they're doing. So, But you guys really carved out a good audience for yourself. Yeah.
We really did.
Who were you working with at the time? Who were some of your first jocks when you were taking over as PD?
Walt Adams.
Sure.
And Mike Foster.
Okay.
Jeff Allen.
There's a name I haven't heard in a while. Yeah.
Still, he's in Virginia right now.
Is he?
Yep.
Cool.
And there were so many more. Chris Holmberg along the way.
I wondered. I taught both Walt and Chris at the new school. Yeah, and knew that they'd gone over to you. Yeah.
Chris came to us, I'm going to say like 83, 84, something like that.
Yeah.
And he ended up being music director and eventually assistant PD. And he was very good because I was very conservative. And he was listening to people like Fly a lot, and he was getting the new music, getting the calls from the record companies.
Sure.
And he and I would argue about what should go on and what shouldn't go on, and he was a good advocate for that. And I think between the two of us, I think we did well.
And his on-air presence, I said I taught him at the new school. I didn't have to teach him. He walked in a full-fledged disc jockey. I don't know if he'd been practicing at home. I forget, what his background was. Yeah. I just know that the first time I heard him on the little closed circuit, place that we had where the kids, not all of them were kids, would practice. I'm listening. I'm going, why isn't this guy on the radio already? And so he just came to us with so much natural talent, and then obviously took that from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's one I'd like to sit down with again too. We've kind of lost track a little bit. We're not sure where he is.
I haven't talked to him in a long time. The last I knew, he was at Time Warner as like an assignment editor or something.
Okay.
And even people that work there say he just left and nobody knows where he is. So,
there you go. Okay, so if anybody knows where Chris Holmberg is, get in touch, let me know when you're online listening to this. And because we'd love to, connect up with him. I haven't seen him
Yeah.
Probably since I taught him, because he never worked for me, you know, whereas Walt did. Walt came over, left you guys and came over to GNA.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, you had a good lineup. Now, you also had a young lady working for you, and you probably know where I'm going with this story, by the name of Diane Donato.
Yeah.
And by young,
Diane was great.
By young, I mean, you found out after you hired her that she was only, what, 16, 17
she was
maybe?
17.
17, yeah.
Well, at least 17 when I found out, anyway.
And I had to call you up one Monday morning after listening to her over the weekend and
I'll never
say,
forget that.
would you just tell her it's tremolos, not the tremolis? Would you just do that for me? But, you know, hey, I went on to country radio and mispronounced some names, I'm sure, because I had no background in it whatsoever when I was forced into it or kind of fell into it. And you still hear, believe it or not, you still hear it sometimes happen today.
Oh, yeah.
I heard, instead of Bruce Chanel, I heard Channel the other day. And it's somebody too young and just didn't do the research and doesn't know and sometimes doesn't care, unfortunately. You know, but no, I just thought that was, I almost drove off the road when I heard her do it. And so I had to call
After you called me that day, the next time I saw Diane, I just brought her into the production room and just talking to her a little bit. And I just said, and I brought up this example and I just said, you know, make sure that if you don't know, ask, or if you don't know, but there's nobody to ask, don't say it.
Don't say it.
Yeah, just say silence is golden, or here comes my baby, or whatever it was.
Exactly. Yeah.
And she was like, oh, you know, and then I asked, you know, something that I probably couldn't get away with today, and I just said, but by the way, how old are you anyway? Because I didn't know.
Yeah.
And she goes, 17. Don't fire me.
You know, she was probably 4 years old when the song was out.
I know,
you know,
yeah.
so how she didn't know?
Yeah,
You know,
but she was one heck of a talent.
Oh,
she
it still is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
she still is. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's just too bad. She left, like a lot of us, left the business and went into, you know, a different direction for now. Yeah. Some of us wind up leaving and coming back, you know, and right. You know, drop in and out all the time. But no, she was a lot of fun. You were here with her on the patio when we got together last summer. Yeah. I remember you came up for that from Florida as well. Yeah. Anyway, so you had some good staff there and a good format going. What happens next?
Well, as time went on, we ended up hiring Rick Mitchell to come over, and he did the morning show, and that took the station to another level yet. Yep. Because I had done mornings. J.W. Wagner had done mornings for a little while.
Oh, really? Now that I don't remember.
That was like in the late 80s, I believe.
Okay. All right.
And I mean, I think he did it for a couple of years.
Huh.
And I had done mornings for an awful long time, and I was blessed with a good voice, but you know, I'm not a personality, so we really needed somebody to take it from just time and temperature to to put some personality. So Rick was a great addition there too, and we did an awful many promotions and a whole lot of dances and parties and remotes and stuff. And then around early 90s, Bill Selwood bought a couple of stations in Lexington, Kentucky, and hired a couple of guys to go out and do that. And that didn't work out too well, and he ended up kind of losing the company, unfortunately, and he was forced to sell, essentially. And then Paul Bendett from Australia came in to buy the place, and he was just a different operator. He had a top-notch station, and he kind of came in and wanted to do it his way. And not too much longer, after he owned it, I left. Bob Osfeld was the general manager at K-Lite, and he went over to TRY Picks. I followed him over a few months later to be program director of TRY, AM and FM at that time.
Sure.
And then that was sold, and they consolidated, and that left me out of it. And I ended up going back to K-Lite for a little bit. and working there for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months or so. And,
is it coming to you by this time that maybe radio isn't the way to earn a living to retire on? Yeah.
Well, I kind of always had that in the back of my mind, because I always joked, even when I was at the Times Union early on, I just said, I'm going to have to work till I'm 80.
Yeah.
But
so tell us about that transition, because that's where we reconnect after all these years. But so you after 6 or 8 months back at K-Lite.
I left K-Lite and ended up going to work for the Times Union very part-time. They had a program called Sourceline, where you would dial phone numbers and you would get everything from obituaries to garage sales to all kinds of stuff.
I remember that.
And
yes.
Judy Vopolak, who had been over at GY, was at the Times Union, and she was running that program. And she hired me along with a couple of other people to voice the stuff. So I would go in there, usually in the evening, and rip and read stuff and record it onto the phone. And I would spend an hour or two there, and I'd be walking out the door going, please, somebody just trip me and keep me here. And I ended up working with Larry Mossy, who had already been there. Larry came into the marketing department at the Times Union and brought Macs into the newspaper, Mac computers.
Okay.
And he was doing a whole lot of design and publication work, and I started working with them, doing odd things. I started to learn Quark Express.
Wow.
And while I learned some of it, you'll never see me as a designer, but I learned some of it, and it helped me. But I would be doing interviews to get stories to go into these things, and just whatever needed to be done. And then marketing director Bob Provost brought me in one day and said, I have our office manager is going to be going out on maternity leave. Would you like to fill in for her? And I said, sure. And that meant I followed him to every meeting he went to.
Okay.
I took notes.
Yeah.
And I learned a ton about the newspaper that way. And then at that point, I just kept filling in for different people, and they finally hired me. And I ran the newspaper and education program. And then, from there, I went to circulation. And then I went to the business office, and then to advertising. So
wow.
I jumped around there as changes were happening, as they needed people in different places.
Sure. Much like what radio was back in the day. I mean, you would do what you had to do. I mean, there are stations where I wrote the commercials and read the commercials, and almost I think there was one time in Mississippi I actually did the program logs, and put where they were going to go. And then newsman, in addition to being an on-air talent, and so a lot of it you were doing the same thing in the newspaper. Now, where we reconnected again. Probably the first time since seeing you and Rick out at a nightclub was when you were doing the education thing. Yeah. And I'm not exactly sure how it worked. I believe somebody I had worked in marketing with had come on to your staff, and I believe that's how the connection happened.
Yeah, I think the teacher, Ronnie Kent.
That's who it was.
Had worked with you at some point, or worked with you. Worked with somebody else.
We were both doing marketing for CPA firms, and she went from there to the newspaper. I went from there to a publishing company that did marketing materials for CPA firms. Yeah. So that's where we knew each other, and so she connected us up. I believe, did you have some, I don't know, did you have student tours come over to Newkirk where I was working? Maybe that's what it was.
That's one of the things
publishing
that we did.
Company.
I ran the newspaper and education program that where it was a program where teachers would get the newspaper and they would use that as curriculum. To teach with, and we would give them curriculum to go with a newspaper.
Sure.
And early, like it was 96, that Bob Provost had talked to BOCES, and they had come up with this New Visions public communications program. and he didn't have time to deal with it. And he said, "Can you help me integrate this?" Because it needed to be integrated into the newspaper. And so, I mean,
you had these high school kids coming in and learning sort of on the job sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with my goals at the newspaper.
Yeah.
But because it was education, it kind of fell under me, and I just fell in love with the program.
Sure.
And Ronnie Kent and I got along well. And she was, she had a marketing mind anyway, and she was a good teacher for them, and so they moved us to the White House at the newspaper, and it was a house that was just across the parking lot from the building, and there was offices in there, and they made a classroom, and so we kind of joked that I was the principal, and the kids would come to me for advice, sometimes, and it was one of the more rewarding parts of my career ever.
Yeah, had to be. Yeah.
And it was great. I still talk to many of them. So.
Yeah. That's the way I felt when I worked at the New School, as it was known then, New School of Contemporary Radio. Yep. I just felt like I was giving back to the guys that put up with me at 16 and 17 years old, breaking into the business. Yeah. And that if I could get these folks a little above the average Joe that was trying to get into radio, that it was very rewarding. Yeah. Now, do I remember half or an eighth of the people I taught? No. And did an eighth of the people I taught wind up staying in the business? No. But we had some real talent come through, as we've talked about already. Yeah. And we had others that just decided this was the third choice they had in what they wanted to do with their lives, and it didn't work out. So But it was very rewarding. Teaching always to me has been. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would arrange. I mean, I had a budget, thankfully, back then, and I would arrange for a bus trip to New York City to go see Hearst and the Housekeeping Institute.
Wow,
they always loved that.
Yeah,
and we always went out to Boston too, to the Hearst station out there in Boston, and so. We had a lot of time together in those early years, and I think it was like 2001. I moved back into the big building and went to circulation. But a lot of the things that I did were similar to radio because I had to figure out how to do them, and not everybody maybe would have been able to do it. But with radio, you're used to scrapping and dealing with what you got.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. Well, when I got the opportunity after leaving radio full time, not on my own, it wasn't my idea, but I decided to look outside the business after being let go in '86, and the opportunity came up to do this marketing for a CPA firm. I said to the person that thought I'd be good for the job, I said, I don't even know what marketing is. She goes, well, you've been doing it on the radio for years, How you promote the station is marketing. Now you just have to promote these CPAs as to what they can do for people, and you can do that through through advertising, which was illegal back before 1980 something. Yeah. And so, so I had no idea what it was going to do to change my direction in life. But thank goodness, because again, working for the publishing company for 12 years, I was able to save up enough to retire when it came time. Yeah. And then finding that part-time radio was enough for me was nice too, and to be able to do that at the same time. And nobody had a problem with that. Did you miss it, or did you just dive headfirst into the TU and never look back?
I miss the people in radio, and still, would go do lunch or dinner or something like that with them and get together. But I really put my all into the newspaper. I mean, I remember going to the publisher a couple of times in those first couple of years and saying, thank you. I mean, I feel like I'm born again.
Yeah.
Because, you sit there after 20 some years in radio, and you go, you do the Peggy Lee thing. Is this all there is? And I was truly thankful to be there.
Nice.
And every place has its frustrations, but I wouldn't be where I am today had it not been for the newspaper.
There you go.
With the 401k and the pension. And
thank goodness you were there during a healthy time for newspapers.
Yeah.
Which right now they're just like local radio. They're suffering. They're finding it tough to keep going. So so you worked there for how many years at the time, Jimmy?
23. I actually did 23 in radio and 23 at the newspaper.
Is it that interesting? Yeah.
And I realized that on my last days, and so when at the one of the last days of my career, everybody gathered with a cake, as they usually do when people leave, and I just said, I said, when I realized it was 23 and 23, I had to leave.
Oh, that's it. That's it. Exactly. And it's interesting that would happen to you. I was in the radio business full-time for 17 years, and then I did not go back to broadcasting except part-time until joining WMHT TV, and that was 17 years from the time I'd left radio. So there was some symmetry there, too. And I thought, okay, I'm back in broadcasting, and this is where I'll end up. Of course, PBS had other ideas, and it didn't work out, but if you were trying to predict the path some of us wound up taking, there's just no way you could see it coming.
Yeah.
And and like you said, don't look back. And I tried not to. I've always had fun with everything I've done, and looked forward to getting up and going to work pretty much, my whole career, no matter what the career was at the time.
I never did a ton of it, but even after I left radio, I would still do voice work for like Cotton Hill and those, and
cool.
and that kept me in it. I did. I was the voice of WNYT from like 80 to 88.
Wow.
And did that.
I didn't remember that. I always wanted to do that for a TV or radio station.
And I would go in like for the new season, and I would go in there and sit on their set and watch the video and have to line up stuff, and I would have done that for free.
Yeah.
I didn't get paid well, but I would have done it for free.
Absolutely.
It was just incredible, and to hear my stuff on TV was just cool. And my wife and I, it was about 2009 or so, we started to do wedding photography.
Yes.
And so some of those earlier years, I did video along with her, and then we kind of gave that to my son. But I did editing of the video electronically, something that I had never done in radio, because I got out of it just at the time where everybody was switching over
to the digital,
digital stuff. Yeah. And so that was, another outlet.
Yeah, exactly. Still to this day, one of my favorite things to do is post-production on these podcasts.
Yeah.
I will spend time just to make sure it's come together right. I'll do some edits just to make sure my guests sound, good.
Yep.
And it still gives me quite a thrill to hear the final product and say, I was able to tweak that and make that work. Sure. And I enjoyed that when I was, I did very little bit of editing, but a little bit of that when I worked in TV at WMHT. And it wasn't digital yet. We're talking actually it was going digital by that time that I actually went to work for them. But I had volunteered for them so long prior to that I was able to play around with equipment and stuff. Yeah. So, when I look back on it, that first time I walked into a radio station at 11 years old, it was the equipment that wowed me. I'm watching the things bouncing around, the dials bouncing and the lights flashing and stuff, and I'm thinking, oh man, this looks like it'd be fun to operate, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing, I was just thinking the other day that, all through my radio career, I never got to work at a new place. We got new studios and stuff like that, but it just wasn't quite the same. It was on a budget, and and you look at all these sound magazines, and you go, oh man, look at that board, it's beautiful. And then you go over to Cotton Hill, and you go, this is where I wanted to work right here.
Yeah.
You got to do that
a little bit
at TRY, because the studios were newer, and but never got that opportunity. But I always drooled over the equipment.
Oh, sure. No, I've lucked out and worked at some, we put GNA on the air brand new, so we had all brand new equipment when we started that. Of course, we put it in a bank building in the middle of Troy, so it wasn't really, we weren't starring large, if you will.
Right.
But to have all that new equipment, and I remember when to hear it in stereo, because I'd worked on AM and mono the whole time. So here I am now on an FM station, and we've got these two huge RCA speakers in each corner of the studio. And before we we actually signed on in late '73. Some of the guys would bring in, the latest Ringo Starr album. We'd put it on, play it in audition, and just blast the neighborhood away, And I just remember those great days of, playing with new equipment. Always fun. Yeah. Cool. So, you retired now for quite a few years, and a few years back moved down to Florida.
Yeah. We just decided. Unfortunately, my daughter had gotten sick with breast cancer about 5 years ago. She's doing good now.
Good.
She's doing great. But she was in Florida, and she was in Cape Coral, which is where we are. And I never thought of myself as a Florida guy.
Yeah.
But we would go down there when she was sick and supporting her. And my wife's a nurse, so Jen was able to, pick her brain a lot. And, Jen she could make suggestions and stuff. And we would always rent an Airbnb near her. And we'd sit there by the pool going, we could do this.
Yeah, especially in December, January. Yeah.
And so we just decided, my wife did an awful lot of research and found the house that we're in, and we moved there. And while my daughter was sick, my next oldest son, who was working at Global Foundries, convinced them to let him buy a house down there and work from home.
Oh, wow.
So he was down there. So we had two kids in the same neighborhood.
Great.
And we went down. We ended up moving down here, leaving our youngest son and his family here. And during COVID, he just decided, I'm coming down.
Smart.
And now they're there too. So
wow, pretty
we're
nice.
all within 5-10 minutes of each other.
With how many grandchildren now?
We have 4 grandchildren.
4 kids, yeah. Cool. Good for you guys. Yeah. Excellent. Well, as I say, you're looking healthy. Help being in a place that has sunshine most of the time. I can see how that would happen. As long as you don't get flooded out or blown out by a storm. I know you've had some challenges there over the last few years. But
I'd hoped we could wait to see a hurricane for a few more years. But we experienced it.
You did, yeah. A lot of folks did.
Yeah.
No, we're just thrilled that you were able to find the time in your busy schedule this week coming home to sit with us, and
my pleasure.
Thank you for what you did bring with you production wise. I understand you've got some stuff on reel, but forever ever on reel because nobody's got a reel-to-reel machine anymore.
Unfortunately, I just I did a lot of air checks, but I always kind of tossed them, thinking I can do better.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, it's like I don't have much.
I wound up saving mine only because we did a bunch of contests during my days at GNA where people had to submit music on cassettes. Okay. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're not returning these cassettes, so we wind up with a plethora. Yeah. So I just started saving stuff. So I've got much too much, and it's one of the reasons I started the podcast. Was I think I'm going to start throwing this stuff out there into the universe and just see what happens. Yeah. And most people, they get to the part where my air check's coming up and they go, okay, I've had enough of this guy, and they don't listen. That's fine, just as long as it's out there. So someday when my granddaughter, who by the way is celebrating her 13th birthday today,
happy birthday.
When she decides, I do want to find out what Papa did in radio, they'll be out there. She'll be able to, because she's not gonna take any of these CDs and put them in a machine. She doesn't even have a machine. I don't think that plays the CDs. So,
I don't think I have a machine except for in the car.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Oh, how fast it changes.
It certainly has.
Well, John, thanks again for coming in. Best of the family.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.
And let's I hope to see you again. I know you come up here 2-3 times a year. You've been coming up, so hopefully next time you're in town, we can get the gang together for lunch and
sounds good.
I'll catch up. All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Radio Split Ranch.
Another one of the nice guys in the broadcasting business, Mr. Jon Knott. Can't thank him enough for visiting us in person on one of the chilliest days in May in the Northeast, far from his warm Florida home. During John's 23 years in radio, he was heard on just 6 area radio stations, a bit below our average. Our continuing count of stations represented by 22 guests so far at the Radio Split Ranch is now 224. By the way, if you ever have any guest suggestions for our monthly conversation here, please let us know. I've got my own list, but it might not include one of your favorite personalities from your radio or TV past. You can make a comment on our Facebook page anytime, or even drop me a personal note at wgarling@aol.com. To wrap up this month's entertainment, this is entertaining, right? Just checking. We're going back some 25 years to January 24th, 1998, when I was still live on the air and making mistakes. You don't think I just saved the perfect air checks, did you? Got Chris Warren for you on WRVE in Schenectady, New York, The River, as it is still affectionately called. There's some good goofs in here, as I probably got to bed too late the night before. So enjoy it. We hope to see you back here next month with another guest. In the meantime, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. The River, 99.5 WRVE. Mama told me not to come, but do I listen? Yeah, Three Dog Night. Peter Gabriel, Salisbury Hill before that. And Hootie and the Blowfish from Cracked Rear View and Let Her Cry. 6:11. Good morning, 31. Cloudy skies. The best of the classics and the new stuff, plus some songs you just can't find anyplace else. The River, 99.5 WRVE.
You say
The River, 99.5 WRVE. There's some Dave Matthews Band. What would you say? From Under the Table and Dreaming. Also heard Peter Frampton, Show Me the Way, and John Cougar Mellencamp at Rockin' in the USA, R-O-C-K if you want to be correct about all that. All on the River. Glad to have you here. Good morning. 23 after 6 o'clock. I'm Chris Warren. They say ice is nice, but only on the bending backyard boughs. Watch that first step outside this morning. It's a doozy after a night of sleet and freezing rain. And if you do skate to your car, okay, allow some scraping time this morning. Watch the driveway and watch the drive. Still slush-covered side streets and very slippery main roads this morning await you. We'll have the forecast for you coming up next in just a few. And perhaps one of the penultimate rock classic song coming up in just a few moments. It's certainly very close to the top of my list for rock and roll radio. In just a few moments here from, well, we'll give you a hint, Derek and the Dominoes. Need I say more? Have you got your River 1998 calendar yet? I've got mine hanging in my office, and we can mail it to your home or office. All you have to do is drop by the River website, www.wrve.com. Click on 1998 calendar of all things, or you can pick it up for just $1 at the Glen Peter Manufacturing Jewelers. Proceeds benefit Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and it's another River Cares event. River Cares for Kids event, if you will. From 99.5 WRVE.
Thousand Scoobers. Open Super Bowl Sunday, noon till 4.
Hey, it's a River Mini Concert weekend. I almost forgot to tell you. Got another one of your favorite artists from the River coming up back to back to back, I guess, if you look at it that way. It'll be Creedence Clearwater Revival just a little bit from now, right here on the River. 99.5 WRVE. Here's the River forecast. The WRVE weather. Cloudy, spotty, light freezing drizzle this morning is possible. Be careful. 37 will be our high later today. Cloudy, windy with scattered snow showers tonight. 23 for the low. And then watch for a cloudy Sunday and a high of 34 on Super Bowl day. Cloudy and 31 right now. This is the place you'll always find rock and roll without the hard edge. We're known as the River. 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. Some of the best of Britain in that break right there, that musical interlude from the Kinks. So Tired of Waiting. Had some George Harrison, What Is Life? And the classic Layla from Derek and the Dominoes from Layla, and other assorted love songs. All on the River, 99.5 WRVE. I've got rock and roll coming up in just a few minutes here that is sure to melt the ice on your car windows as you head out this morning. So don't, never mind the defroster. Just crank up the stereo for Heart, Wallflowers, Stones, Elton John, Foreigner, plus perhaps the only group in rock and roll history whose manager became a household name. He signed the group to a contract 34 years ago today, coming up in the next hour. Ever wanted to help program your favorite radio station? Well, if you've got 90 minutes, you can help program the River. You can join the River Listener Advisory Board. We're going to meet next month, February, and your ideas will help make the River the best it can be. but only if you join. You got to send us your name, address, birth date, and daytime phone number. You can either fax it to the River Repeat Business Fax System at 452-4899, or you can mail it, of course, to WRVE, 1 Washington Square in Albany, 12205, or email us at www.wrve.com. That's the River website. This really is the radio station that you help program, the River 99.5 WRVE. Let's check out that weather forecast because we've got a River Mini concert coming up next. The WRVE weather cloudy with some spotty light freezing drizzle today. Right now, cloudy and 31 from the River.
Closed Tuesday.
Well, either you're very happy to see me or it's a River Mini concert weekend. I think we'll go with the latter. We're set for another River Mini concert. Please welcome Creedence Clearwater Revival to the River Mini concert weekend on the River 99.5 WRVE. The River and a mini concert weekend. Okay, we cheated a little bit. We played some Creedence Clearwater Revival. There's Bad Moon Rising. We stuck in the middle some John Fogerty, lead singer, whose latest single is Blue Boy from Blue Moon Swamp. Great stuff on the whole CD. And we kicked it off with Creedence doing Born on the Bayou. You got it. On the River, 99.5 WRVE with the Stones, Wallflowers, Dog's Eye View coming up. Here's Foreigner on the River, 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. There's America Ventura Highway. Elton John's Gray Seal and Foreigner. I want to know what love is on the River. 7:13. Good morning. Thanks for listening over in Troy this morning. Appreciate your call to 99.5 FM. The River, 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. Beatles and Rocky Raccoon from the White Album. Also heard Dog's Eye View, Everything Falls Apart. We were referring a little while ago to Brian Epstein, perhaps one of the better known rock and roll managers of all time, who caught the group in the Cavern Club back in 63. And on this date in 1964, signed them to a contract, a management contract. And the rest, as they say, is, boy, is it rock and roll history. Rock and roll still to come this hour. Some Heart in just a few moments. Got a classic from the Stones and a cut from a group that's doing all right for themselves with their second album. Their first album, kind of tanked, but their second one is huge. And the third one, well, they're going to go into the studio and work on it next month. We'll have details in just a few. And, not even a half an hour from right now, we're in the middle of a River Mini concert weekend. We'll have our next River Mini concert. Mr. Bowie will be in the studio, actually be on stage in just about a half an hour here on the River, 99.5 WRVE.
Available at your favorite drugstore and fine health food stores.
Here's WRVE weather, a cloudy day today, maybe even some right now, cloudy and 31, where we specialize in rock and roll for adults. The River, 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. What a great sound. From Heart, a Magic Man. Yeah, he'll be all right. From Dreamboat Annie. Wallflowers, Three Marlenas. Jacob Gillen, yes. Jacob Dillon says they'll be back in the studio in February and March to come up with some great new album. And they say that the sophomore jinx that they're in the business is not going to happen because they already had an album before this big one that they've just had. So they're going to be juniors, he says. No problem. Stones before that kind of works because Wallflowers open for them. You can't always get what you want. I can't read this morning either. You probably figured that out. Got rock and roll to help you forget that you shoveled the driveway last night. Coming up from Boston, Tears for Fears, Van Morrison, Blues Traveler, after the River Mini concert, which is coming up next. You like concerts? We've got a great one for you tonight. Your own, very own concert. Don't have to spend a dime. Just sit at home tonight and listen to Sting. He's headlining this Saturday's Superstar concert. It's tonight at 10 right here on the River, 99.5 WRVE. Here's WRVE weather. Cloudy, some spotty light. Right now, cloudy and 31 from the River.
Get ready.
Lower price every day, all day.
I love these weekends. River Mini concert weekends. There's one underway right now, and we're heading for the stage to listen to Mr. David Bowie on the River, 99.5 WRVE.
The River, 99.5 WRVE. There's David Bowie, Space Oddity. Also heard Rebel from back in 74. And Changes. On the River Mini Concert, we'll do another one in just a little while. Tell you who in just a few. On the River, 99.5 WRVE. Got a lot of rock and roll this hour, and we're not going to stop. We're going to get into some Tears for Fears in a few moments, some Boston. Here's Blues Traveler on the River, 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. Love Hurts, Nazareth, 76. And Blues Traveler, a little more recent. That's Hook on the River, where you get a good mix of rock and roll without the hard edge. Here's Tears for Fears on the River, 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. Some Van Morrison going all the way back to 71 for Wild Night. Tears for Fears, Shout. And we talked about the others that you've already heard this hour. The ones you haven't, only I know. And the guy that put these down on paper here got some Supertramp coming up. Perhaps Genesis, a nice one from Boston from their first album I think from their second album. It was from their second album in just a couple moments. 22 after 8 o'clock, 31 cloudy skies, and we'll go to the forecast here in just a little bit. Want to remind you that it's a River Mini Concert weekend. Going to have some fun. Less than a half an hour from right now, we'll be back to the stage with the Eagles, recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Did you catch that on VH1? I guess it's on again this afternoon at 1 if you didn't catch it last Monday night. Some highlights. Don't miss it early on. There's some of the better things going on, like Fleetwood Mac and Santana. Unbelievable. Tear out the stage. So check it out if you haven't seen it. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. That'll be on at 1 this afternoon, VH1. And in the meantime, we'll rock and roll and check the forecast next on the River, 99.5 WRVE. Scoobers, open Super Bowl Sunday, noon till 4.
Taking the kids out to Disney on Ice this weekend at the Pepsi. Hey, not a bad weekend to do that. Here's WRVE weather. Cloudy, spotty, light drizzle Sunday. You'll be inside, so what does it matter, right? Cloudy and 31 from the River. Thanks for listening to the River, 99.5 WRVE. This is rock and roll without the hard edge. The River, 99.5 WRVE, and some Supertramp, Breakfast in America. Genesis, Man on the Corner from Abacab, and Boston kicked it off with Foreplay, Long Time from their second album. Long time ago on the River, 99.5 WRVE. Good morning, I'm Chris Warren. We love doing this thing on Saturday mornings because, I don't know about you, but it's the music I grew up with and the stuff that I enjoy listening to, and perhaps you too. We do have a River Mini Concert coming up in just a few moments. Following that, I'm sure we'll hit one or two or maybe a dozen that you like. Eric Clapton, Procol Harum, some Joan Osborne, Bob Dylan, and we'll kick it off after the mini concert with the Greg Allman Band in just a little while here on the River. Have you been to the River website to check out our River on the Air wear? This is the same stuff that we were selling at Christmas time over at Colony Center. Now, you can still get it. The mugs and the caps and the boxers and the shirts like the one I wore last week on the air here with the logo. You saw that, didn't you, with the River on it? Yeah. Well, you can set your web browser to www.wrve.com. Click on the Airwear site for details as to how you can get all that good stuff. The River website is made possible with help from Global 2000, your full-service internet access provider. Here's WRVE weather, a cloudy, spotty, light, drizzly morning. Right now, it's cloudy, 31 from the River.
Com on the web.
It's a River Mini Concert weekend. What was your first clue? We want to welcome the Eagles to the stage on the River Mini Concert weekend from 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. I guess I get the award. It's early in 98, but I probably can maintain this spot all year long for the most stupid thing done on the radio recently. I apologize. We started out with Life in the Fast Lane. Eagles went into New Kid in Town from the Eagles and went back into Life in the Fast Lane by the Eagles. So we ruined the no repeat day and we ruined your mini concert. I think you deserve to hear the song that we were supposed to play originally, don't you? All right, we're gonna do that. We're just gonna give you a little extra here because the disc jockey's half asleep. Get some more Eagles on the River, 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRV. It's a River mini concert weekend. You got your fill of Eagles there, Tequila Sunrise, New Kid in Town, and enough life in the fast lane to last you a little while, all on the river. I'm Chris Warren, and I don't know why I'm admitting that. And we've got rock and roll coming up from Mr. Dillon and Joan Osborne. And here's the Greg Allman Band on the River, 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. Bob Dylan's Knockin' on Heaven's Door. Greg Allman Band before that, and I'm No Angel. When we say rock and roll without the hard edge, we mean no rap, no metal. The River, 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. There's some Joan Osborne. And one of us, Bob Dylan's Knockin' on Heaven's Door, and as we mentioned, Greg Allman Band. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. Welcome to the Chris Warren thing. We're trying to figure out exactly how much we should admit to this morning, but we're having a good time anyway, and glad to have you here. Have you heard about Tom and Lisa from the River's Rock and Roll Breakfast getting together with Cabot Cheese? They'd like you and a guest to spend a week at Stowe Mountain Ski Resort. Boy, that's a good idea, including lodging, lift tickets, transportation on Amtrak. We just need to know why you need to get out of the house. You know, a few words, and email them to us at the River website at www.wrve.com, or you can fax them on the River Repeat Business Systems fax at 452-4899. They come in here all times of the day, and we make sure they get right in Lisa's mailbox. So get out and enjoy winter with Cabot Cheese in the River, 99.5 WRVE. We're just less than a half an hour away from another River mini concert on our River mini concert weekend, and we're going to join John Mellencamp on stage in just a little while. Before that, though, some Moody Blues standing by. Eric Clapton got some Procol Harum next on the River, 99.5 WRVE. Here's WRVE weather. We have a cloudy one underway. Cloudy and 32. Here's one of those songs you go, oh, wow, haven't heard that one in a while. Procol Harum's Conquistador, another great example of rock and roll without the hard edge. On the River, 99.5 WRVE. The River, 99.5 WRVE. Gosh, great memories just tied into that song. I love it. Ringo Starr and It Don't Come Easy. Moody Blues, Your Wildest Dreams. Tears in Heaven from Eric Clapton. And we kicked it off with a cut from Procol Harum, a live album they did back in 72 called Conquistador. One of those songs you go, oh, wow, I haven't heard that one in a long time. We do that on Wednesday a lot. We call them Oh, Wow Wednesdays here at the River. Tune us in for a lot of great stuff that you just haven't heard in a little while. We got stuff that you have heard, perhaps, but your favorites. So you're going to hear them again. You want to hear them again. Got some Sean Colvin coming up in a little while. Van Halen, The Who, Sarah McLachlan will be here. Also Leonard Skinner to kick it off after the mini concert, which is coming up next. And of course with Bev Jordan, who's going to step in here and make things all better for me, because it's been one of those Saturday mornings. Thanks for hanging around with us. And if you're going to be around tomorrow night near your stereo, you want to be close, because the Sunday night CD at 10 o'clock tomorrow night is Bryan Adams Unplugged. That's his latest. There's some good stuff on there. You'll enjoy it if you're a Bryan Adams fan. Hang around for it. Tomorrow night, 10 o'clock on the River, 99.5 WRVE. Here's WRVE forecast. The weather calling right now. It's cloudy and 32 from the River.
And don't worry, that guy's not invited.
Well, as you can tell by the anxious crowd in the background, it's another River mini concert weekend. Welcome to the stage, John Mellencamp. To the River, 99.5 WRVE.